yeah, to give you the backstory on what happened. So, I mean, I'll try to make it as short as possible here. I've been covering the sport since 2007. Actually, for the first 2 years that I was covering MMA, I was never credentialed. They wouldn't credential me to UFC events because they always told me that I was too small. Even when I was working for Versus, which used to be one of their broadcast partners, I was working for Versus.com. So the website of their broadcast partner, and they even denied me a credential then. That's how, for lack of a better word, petty they were towards me for some strange reason. But once I got in, I developed a really good relationship with Dana White, and he was incredibly kind to me. I've said this before, but if I never speak to Dana White again, he will have given me more time and been more accessible to me than any fighter that I'll come across from now until the end of my career. He was tremendous towards me, and it's hard for me to say anything negative about him because he was really, really great for a young journalist kind of coming up. And then I started working for Fox in late 2011, which was a dream come true. I told my parents in 2001 that I wanted to get on TV. I wanted to be the Howard Cosell of MMA, and here I was working for Fox. And there were some conflicts that came up and some issues, and I had to sort of bend my own beliefs because when I was working at the events, the money was coming from the UFC, even though Fox was paying the UFC, and I didn't feel comfortable with that, and that led to some sticky situations. And I was actually fired a couple times because I tried to remain a very impartial and neutral journalist doing my own shows and my own coverage on MMAfighting.com, and they would get mad about some of the things that I was talking about. And then the final hammer came down in March of last year where they just kind of let me go from Fox. The UFC told Fox to let me go. Fox put up no fight and just said, a 2-minute phone call. Okay, we're done. And then in June, I was at UFC 199. I'm skipping over a lot of stuff, but I don't want to bore you with all this. In June, I was at UFC 199 in Inglewood, California, and I reported that Brock Lesnar was in talks to come back and that Conor McGregor was fighting Nate Diaz at UFC 202. And right before the main event, I was called to the back. Dana was there, and he told me to get out of the building. He told me that I was banned for life, and that they would do everything in their power to ruin my career, and that I wouldn't cover the UFC again. And that was a very emotional thing. And I went on my show that Monday, and I really thought that this is the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I really thought that I was going to have to figure things out, and I was kind of coming at peace with it all. But I wanted to kind of put all the cards on the table. I wanted to just tell everyone what had happened to me over the last 5 years and the ups and downs and the sticky situations. I wanted no skeletons in my closet. It's where I just told the whole story, and the viewership was nuts. It's crazy. Like every show, I try to get the best guests possible. I try to get like 6 to 8 guests, and the one show where I didn't have any guests is our most watched show. And then the best part, for me at least, what was most helpful was that people like Rich Eisen and Dan Patrick and Dan Lebitard and Rachel Nichols, Scott Van Pelt, incredible journalists, legendary journalists, broadcasters who, some of whom I've never met, went to bat for me and shed some light on this situation. I know that the UFC didn't want the world to know about this. They wanted this to remain in their little bubble, as had happened in the past with other journalists, and it just kind of exploded. And like you said, 48 hours later, they relented. And a lot of people still like to make fun of me that I got emotional on my show. I was shedding some tears. What they don't know is that I'm an incredibly emotional person. Like I average a cry a day. We watched a show called This Is Us, my wife and I, and I'm crying like 5 times an episode. I'm just you remember Dick Vermeil? Like I am Dick Vermeil. I cry so much. And so,
it's awesome. It's good that you put it out there though, man. Like you don't have to be Tommy Tough Guy. It's all right. I love
that's who I am. I cry a lot. And, what was emotional for me wasn't that my credentials were taken away. It was that I had a new baby coming, and the most powerful man in the sport was telling me, your career is over, and I'm going to do everything in my power to ruin your career. If you don't get emotional hearing that, I don't know what you're doing in your career. So it wasn't because I couldn't go to any UFC event. That would suck. I would hate that. But it was really because of what was happening around me, and I felt like, oh wow, I put all my eggs in this basket in this one sport, and now because of one decision and one irrational move on their part, it's over. And I've seen them do this to other people. And so, they relented. They gave me back the credentials. It was a little awkward at first going back to the first few events, but now to me, it's water under the bridge. I know people are still interested in it, and I'm fine talking about it. I've yet to speak to Dana about it. He did a scrum for UFC 207 right before the Ronda fight. And I asked him 2 questions, and he was totally fine, and that was nice. And, hopefully one day we can get back to, just the relationship that we had, not being best buds, hanging out, partying, but just where I can interview him and ask him questions and things like that, because I think that, it's healthier for everyone involved. But I have not reached out to him. He has not reached out to me, and maybe one day there'll be an appropriate time to do so, but I don't feel like right now is.
Why was that the final straw for them? Can you explain what you just announced that Brock was in talks to fight before that they officially announced it?
Yeah. I prefer the word reported, right? I mean, no different than Schefter or any other, Mortensen. You report things that you hear, you find out that they're true. If they're false, then you're in big trouble. But this was obviously true. And I didn't know when they were going to announce it. I didn't know how they were going to announce it, but I get a scoop like that. You're damn sure that I'm going to report it. And I would do the exact same thing again. I would not do a single thing differently. But what happened was, when I was working for Fox, I would go on this show called UFC Tonight every Wednesday. And my role was kind of like this Jay Glazer type of role, where I'd have, 5 or 6 scoops, news and notes about what's going on. And it was a popular segment from what I'm told. And then I stopped working for Fox. So now I just work for my website. But when I was working for Fox, I would hold on to a lot of stories because I needed to get 5 or 6 stories a week for that segment. And what people don't understand, even the people at Fox didn't understand, is it's hard to get 5 or 6 scoops a week in the UFC, because unlike Jay Glazer, who covers the NFL, he has to deal with 30 owners, 30 GMs, 30, head coaches, a hell of a lot more players. There's a lot more out there. I'm dealing essentially with one ownership, right? I'm dealing with one group, and they love to control what goes out there. They tell all their fighters not to talk to the media. All the managers are afraid. So you're stopping short at selling, your firstborn son, to try to get, some of this information. So now that I was free and didn't have to do that, I was just reporting things when I got them. And they were getting annoyed that I was beating them to the punch. And, I know, so when they let me go, they tried to replicate that segment, and they tried to just, make up a segment where they were just, the UFC was giving, a reporter some news that they wanted out at the appropriate time. And I know as a journalist, Wednesday night at 8:00 on FS1, they're going to break some news, because they're going to try to tell everyone that it's all okay here. It's business as usual. So as a reporter, if I know that there's news to be broken, that it's coming, I'm going to try to get it. Of course, that's my job. And so they were getting annoyed that I was out scooping them. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. No different again than what Woj does for the NBA draft. He gets the news, he puts it out there. If you don't want to follow him, you don't have to follow him. But news is news. And if you can get it first, then in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. So they were getting upset, and from what I was told, this was kind of like the last straw. They were, and as I told Dana, this is no different than what happens in any other sport. It's not like I was editorializing. It wasn't like I was trying to kick them, below the belt, or I was being unfair, or, anything like that, biased. I was just reporting news. Brock Lesnar is in talks to fight at UFC 200. Again, as you know, no different than what goes on in every other sport, but they love to control everything, and they just had enough, and they thought that they can get rid of me. And I kind of believe that Lorenzo Fertitta never liked me, and this was kind of his last goodbye to me before selling the company. This was his last thing, and thankfully, like I said, cooler heads prevailed.
Now, did they report that they came to you and said, "Don't put this out"?
They had their PR guy, Dave Schaller, say that I forget the term that he used, that I was, what I was doing wasn't journalism, that it went against journalism, and that it was proper journalism to come to them for some kind of confirmation before I ran a story like that, which to me, yeah, sure. If you guys had a system in place where if I came to you with a question and you were actually honest in your response, then I would be happy to come to you, but they haven't been. For example, what happens is, Dana White has actually come out on the record multiple times saying that I will lie to the media if it behooves me. If I need to lie, I will lie. Okay, well, that's important to know. And so I've gone to them knowing 100%, having it confirmed, multiple sources, contract signed, whatever. And I've said to them, is this true? And they'll say, no, it's not. And then they'll give it to someone else. They'll report it themselves a couple hours later. And I can guarantee you, I mean, if there's one thing that I'm sure about in this lifetime, especially if they had this, this big pay-per-view reveal that they were going to do. If I would have come to them and said, hey, is it true that you guys are about to sign Brock Lesnar? What do you think they would have said to me? In fact, 24 hours prior, ESPN asked them about this, and Dana said no to the reporter's face. So what do you think they would have said to me a couple hours before the pay-per-view announcement? And then I would have been stuck because I would have had the president of the UFC or someone from the UFC telling me no, and then I would have defied them. So to me, if someone does an interview and says, Dana White said this to me, Dana White did this to me, he was rude to me, he cut me, something like that. If someone says something disparaging about someone in the UFC, then as a proper journalist, I think it's very important to get both sides of the story. Then I think that's good journalism. I think that you have to always get both sides when it's a he said, she said situation. But if I know that someone signed a contract, multiple fighters, multiple sources tell me that this guy is doing this, is about to do that, then I don't feel like I have to get it on the record from them. I really don't. And there's nothing in the journalist handbook that says that. And so they tried to put this out there that I was, not being a proper journalist, which I think every step of the way, if I'm being honest, I thought they handled it wrong. If they would have put out they would have sent me an email 2 weeks after the event. Hey, on second thought, don't bother, applying for a credential. You're not allowed here. You're not welcome here anymore. It would have been a thing. I don't think it would have been as big of a thing. If they didn't put out the statement that they put out afterwards, it would have been a thing. Wouldn't have been as big a thing. But I thought every step of the way, by doing it at the arena, by kicking out not only me, but my videographer and photographer who did absolutely nothing wrong, the statement they said afterwards, all that stuff, I think it just kept piling on, and people reacted. And I'll never, ever, ever forget the way, the fans reacted and had my back. It was the most surreal 48 hours of my life for sure.
Well, I think it definitely, you were already super highly respected by fighters and the fans, but it turned you into this cult hero. I remember one of the next press conferences or weigh-ins, you stood up to ask a question, and like the whole place gave you a standing ovation.
It was insane, man. It really was. I couldn't believe it. So that was UFC 200, and I stand up and that happens, and I honestly, again,
how'd you not cry there, man?
Well, I'm telling you right now, I'm starting to cry. I'm telling you the Dick Vermeil thing. This is my life. And so people came up to me that weekend and were giving me hugs. I'm so happy to see you back. One guy gave me a Carmelo Anthony. I'm a big Melo fan. I'm a Knicks fan. I went to Syracuse. One guy gave me a Carmelo Anthony Syracuse authentic jersey. He said, I've been holding on to this for the last couple of days, hoping to see you in the hotel. I wanted to give you this. Another fan gave me a box of chocolates, gave me a card because it was my birthday that weekend in July. I just couldn't believe how nice they were and how they had my back. And the emails, I'm kind of obsessive compulsive, so like I like to have box or text messages, things like that. And I had over 400, and it was all just, I got your back. I'm going to fight for you. I'm never going to watch the UFC again. I can't believe, like, things like that. And it was just unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, I honestly wish it never happened. It's regretful. I don't think anyone wanted it to happen that way, but I can't believe the reception was just mind blowing. And again, for someone who looks up to, these broadcasters, to see these people who I admire so much, follow them, consume all their media, start talking about me. I made my SportsCenter debut, talking about myself. And that's just insane. I always wanted to be on SportsCenter, but I didn't think I would be talking about myself with Scott Van Pelt. And even before we went on air, he was giving me advice. I couldn't wrap my head around it all. So yeah, it was, again, surreal is the best word that comes to mind.